Welcome to Real Estate Radio Live, an informative and engaging hour discussing everything you need to know about the world of real estate. Your host, Joe Cucchiara, provides you with insight and guidance on how to buy, sell, finance, and invest in real estate. He also offers real estate tax management strategies, new construction advice, home improvement tips, and much, much more. And now, to guide you around the world of real estate, here's your host and Real Estate Radio Live team leader, Joe Cucchiara.
Welcome in. Good afternoon. Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. Thank you so much for spending some time with us this afternoon. As we roll through the week here, just a reminder, you could listen to us a couple different ways. One is on the radio at KDOW 1220 AM. You could also listen to us live online in any time during the show between 3 and 4, no matter where you are. That's the convenience of online at KDOW.biz. You could click on the button that says Listen Live, and as long as you're there between 3 and 4 on Pacific Daylight Time, you're good. You could listen to the show live. However, what we'd like you to do is download the app and be able to have access to the podcast, because we realize not everybody has the luxury of listening to the show from 3 to 4. So with technology these days, we have podcasts, and they're a wonderful tool. If you go to RERadiolive.com, that's www.RERadiolive.com, you could download the app there, or you could go to iTunes, Stitcher, all the normal places where if you just enter Real Estate Radio Live, you could get the app and then listen to the show at your convenience when you can. Also, we're a live show. We love your calls and questions. There's two ways to interact with us during the show, and one is the toll-free number, 1-800-516-1220, if you'd like to give us a call, or for those that want to text, 408-838-9060. Most of you know that have been following the show. The focus is education and information, and we work really hard here at Real Estate Radio Live to have great guests like we have today, provide you with content information. The main objective really is to educate and inform you, make you a more wise consumer to make better decisions in and around your real estate. So with that, let me invite my guest in, Mr. Chapin Hemphill, as he's the owner and of Keyrenter Silicon Valley. Chapin, welcome in.
Thank you for having me.
Good to have you. Good to have you here today. It's good. We've been talking about this topic for a while, so I'm going to throw the topic out there, and some of you might go, What is this topic? And it is interesting, but I'm excited about it, and Chapin is the expert for sure. So we have the right person here in the studio. So HUD's new guidelines, this is is the new guidelines on criminal backgrounds during tenant screening with property management. So we're going to talk about this. Most of you that have rented or renting, or maybe you're thinking about renting, these are some of the things you really need to think about. There's a lot that goes into it. Some people think, if you haven't rented in, at least 5 years or more, then you'd probably be surprised, maybe 10 years. But it shouldn't surprise you with background checks, credit reports, a lot of different things that go into place now with renting. So Chapin's here to talk to us about that. If you have any questions during the show, again, now is a great time to check in during the hour and ask Chapin, because he is the expert for sure. Before we get started on the subject, Chapin, maybe you could give the listeners a little idea of your background and then your current roles and responsibilities with being Keyrenter of Silicon Valley.
Sure, my pleasure. So I've been in property management for about 16 years. I was on the corporate side for a long time, managing large apartment buildings and complexes, involved in development, and I was an asset manager for a real estate fund. And I made a transition about 2 years ago to a private company. I made a decision, like a lot of people, that my own company was the direction I wanted to go. So I've been doing that, and it's been a great amount of fun. It's the best thing I've ever done. I'm loving it. So I started Keyrenter Silicon Valley about a year ago, and it's a property management company. I work mostly with mom and pop rental property owners and some apartment buildings up to about 100 units.
Very good. Well, tell us about this topic. Give us the background, and what are we going to be talking about today? Because it's an important one, and it's a great one. I was looking forward to this when I saw the topic, because it is something that people really need to understand. So tell us about it.
Sure. It's so in April, HUD announced some guidelines on the use of criminal records for tenant screening.
Okay.
So on the surface, there's a lot of reasons why they did this that makes sense, but ultimately, and in the natural way of bureaucracy, there's a quagmire, which is what I want to talk about is how to navigate through that, the confusion. Okay. For a lot of people, this quagmire is scary and confusing because mom and pop and a lot of real estate investors don't really understand what they're supposed to do. HUD has given landlords no examples or direction, and it leaves a lot of people in our industry scratching their heads and rewriting entire policies, and it's challenging.
Right. So maybe most people may know the acronym or the what does HUD stand for, just so most people understand that.
Sure,
what we're talking about.
That is the the Department of Housing and Urban Development.
Yeah. Just so those know. We use it a lot in our business, and I think most people probably know that. But okay, very good. So this is really the primary objective here today is to get people to understand it and then help them kind of go through it so that it's not going to be as complicated or frustrating as this. Now, you said this came in place in April of this year? Is that right?
Yeah.
So have you, or has it been too early, Chapin, to get any kind of feedback or thoughts or in terms of how this is affecting the rental market, or is it too early for that?
The initial reaction from a lot of people that read this on the surface is, oh my gosh, I now have to allow ex-convicts into my property, or I'm going to be there's going to be a filing of a lawsuit against me, discrimination lawsuit. It's not quite that. Okay. So I'll quell some fears by saying there's a way around it, not a way around it, a way through it. That does make sense. It's just it takes a lot of organization, thought, and careful procedures. Okay. Yeah.
Very good. So, in terms of the landlord, maybe we could talk about this in two ways. First, we want to start with the landlord, how they use it, how it's to be used. In other words, how does is this more? I'm guessing again. I just want to assume. Is this more as a landlord's perception that this is not going to be good for them as a property owner?
Yeah. I mean, landlord and actually there are some tenants that are aware of what's going on, and their fear, of course, is, well, who's going to be moving in next to me?
Yeah, good point. So it could be neighbors, tenants, apartment complex. It could be someone right next to you.
Yeah.
Where do you? Yeah, I could see that.
In fact, a good example of how that is troubling is a tenant. In fact, I know of a owner whose tenant approached them and said, "If you move somebody in that has a criminal record, I will be moving out."
Okay.
So, and they have a fourplex. What does that mean? Does it mean everyone's moving out? So it's challenging.
And do they know? Will they know? Do they have to know? So if there's a fourplex,
there people who utilize the internet in a variety of ways, and they think they know. Okay. There are sites that out there that provide quote unquote information, and so they take it for what that is.
But the landlord, property owner, is not doesn't have to notify them and let them know what they're doing.
No.
Okay.
In fact, they shouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell us, maybe the best way to do it too is tell us how it's done now. So how is it? Maybe that's a good thing. How is it done now when someone applies to rent a property, and then maybe comparison of what it looks like?
Well, yeah. So I'll tell you about how the rules have changed.
Yeah.
The new guidelines on the subject of the criminal records essentially state that a blanket policy on banning applicants with criminal records may be violating the Fair Housing Act, which, of course, the Fair Housing Act protects individuals in protected classes from discrimination.
Sure.
So what we need to note, of course, is individuals with criminal records are not a protected class. So this is where it becomes confusing. Well, how is it that we are discriminating?
Right.
How it used to be before April, most landlords had a blanket policy to deny ex-convicts. The blanket policy, from a general perspective, protected these landlords from a perceived threat for the safety of the property and the individuals living in the property. This is, it's an understandable concern, especially when the landlord can be liable for the actions of the tenants that it allows to move into their property.
How does this affect, too, or maybe we'll get to it, but so does this go along the same lines? You hear a lot of people talk about Megan's Law and sex offenders, those types of things. Does this play into that at all, or is that something totally different?
It plays into it only in that most of those individuals are ex-convicts. So
I see.
So
okay.
what your policy ends up being can define who you allow to live in your property. But HUD is saying that you need to have a very good reason why you're denying somebody like that.
Yeah.
So somebody with a sexual predator history is a good example of somebody that in your policy you should exclude from living in your property. They pose a danger to neighbors, to other tenants at the property, and that would be acceptable as long as you have that as your policy in a clear procedure and you apply it to everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you're a landlord, Chapin, going through a property owner, and I own a few properties too, going through a process of interviewing applicants, I've been fortunate because I've had this, pretty much the same ones for the last 10 or 12 years. But when you go through a process new and you're interviewing, you're going through that, and something, I guess what I'm saying, first of all, I guess I'll back up a little bit. In the Silicon Valley, it just seems, maybe it'll change soon, but we're fortunate, I guess, in a sense that places are in demand. And there's a lot of shortage. Now I think it's flattening a little bit, but in general, rents have doing nothing but going up. So people feel like they'd be a little more picky, et cetera, et cetera. How does one know, we're going to take a break here in less than 2 minutes, but how does one know when you're a landlord, or let's say I'm not a landlord, but if you're seeking an apartment or a place to rent, you fill out an application and you're denied, if you feel suspicious, do you submit some kind of, submit something that would indicate that you were discriminated against, or if it happens a couple times, or is it a personal thing? I guess what I'm saying is, what would trigger someone to think that they're being discriminated if they keep getting turned down?
Well, if they keep getting turned down, I would think that was an indicator of that there's something wrong in their actual the reports that are coming in.
Okay.
If one feels like there is an issue, first of all, you're supposed to receive an adverse action letter when you're denied. So you do get information how you can contact someone to discuss it, and then from there you would talk to Fair Housing.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we're going to take our first break. When we come back, we're going to continue this great conversation. It's super interesting. If you have any questions for Chapin, 1-800-516-1220. This is Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. We'll be back with you in just a couple minutes to continue.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Cucchiara.
Welcome back in. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. We're with you 5 days a week, Monday through Friday from 3 to 4. Today we have a guest in studio, Chapin Hemphill. He is the owner of Keyrenter Silicon Valley. We're talking about the topic today, which is an interesting one, HUD's new guidelines on criminal backgrounds during the screening process. And again, if any of you have rented before, or you're about to rent, or family members or friends, you understand this, or maybe you're a little more familiar with it. But just like everything else, laws, rules, things change, and we hope that, for the most part, Chapin, we hope that it's progressive, right? We always hope that laws, changes, things are progressive, which means we're more educated, we learn from our mistakes, we're doing things better. I think that's what we all hope from county, city, government agencies. But you did a good job of explaining the program, why it's at. So tell us a little bit about what's going on now. What can we expect right now as we sit today?
Sure. So a screening policy will be considered unlawful if it is not necessary to serve a substantial, legitimate, non-discriminatory interest of the housing provider. I'm quoting HUD. Or if such interest could be served by another practice that has a less discriminatory effect.
So do you have an English substitute for that?
It has to be necessary to the policy has to be necessary to protect your property or the people living in it or around it.
Okay. All right. So you can't just say, you know what, I don't like this guy or I don't like this gal.
No. You haven't been able to do that for a while.
That's true. But but I get what you're saying. So in other words, there has to be legitimate, going by these guidelines, a reason why you're going to deny something.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
It gets pretty interesting from there. The reason that they're doing this is they found that it's illegal in the Fair Housing Act to discriminate based on race,
right,
color, religion, sex, disability, familial status, national origin. But the Fair Housing Act does not protect people with an arrest or criminal record. So
interesting.
HUD is saying, well, minorities face disproportionately high rates of arrest and incarceration,
okay,
which this is known as unintentional discrimination, right, or disparate impact.
Right.
So disparate impact has kind of entered in the employment world and in some other real
sure,
estate. It's now full on here in rental property management. So they don't want people that they don't want individuals who have been incarcerated to be unintentionally discriminated against because, and I've provided you with some stats that are really interesting.
Yeah.
Our prisons are filled with minorities. I mean, that's the short answer.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot. So
there's some staggering statistics that HUD actually provided. One is that 100 million people in the United States have some kind of criminal record. That is 1 out of 3 people in this country.
I would never guess. That's unbelievable. Wow.
There are 2.2 million adults in the prison population today, which is, United States of America has 5% of the world's population. We have 25% of the prisoners in the world. It's just
something's not going on.
Something's off, and HUD is saying that the state of our policies on prison are creating a discriminatory effect, an unintentional one or intentional, but that they have to draw a line and to allow these individuals to have some fair chance once they get out.
Yeah. So this is really geared towards the unintentional discrimination. I think that's well said.
Yeah.
And the thought process is that the criminal records, the higher rate with the minorities to protect that. It's just, and again, let's face it, folks. I mean, the reality is we all wish we could operate on common sense and good behavior and all that, but the world doesn't work that way. So that's why some of these things have to be put in place, and you have to do the best job at working around them. So that was their logic behind it. Was that the primary logic behind it? You think the driving force?
Yeah.
Okay.
So who does a property manager not have to rent to?
Right.
Is there?
It's a great question.
Yeah. So the Act does not prohibit discrimination, intentional or otherwise, against a person who has been convicted of making or distributing illegal drugs.
Okay.
And I pause to make that distinction because HUD's one of their main ideas here is if you've been arrested, you have not been convicted, you should not have adverse action against you when you want to go out and live the rest of your life. You haven't been convicted.
Yeah.
And some of these screening policies, they deny people because of convictions.
So
because of arrests and not convictions. Yeah.
Well, let me go back to the first segment, and you mentioned something. I want to make sure that people heard this too, which I think is important. If you get denied, so what you're saying is the landlord by law, or the property owner, the property manager, whoever handles those activities, has to generate a document to that person no matter what. Is that right? So if you interview 5 people and you choose one, all 4 of those others have to get what sent to them in the mail?
It's a document called an adverse action letter.
Okay. Yeah. So that's by law. So if they don't get one, what do? Contact HUD and say, hey, I went and looked at this
They
apartment.
could. I mean, I think the logical thing to do is to contact the housing provider and say, hey, what happened? Can you provide me a document as to why?
Perfect.
Yeah.
All right. All right, we're going to take another break. When we come back, much more. If you have any questions, 1-800-516-1220. New guidelines on criminal backgrounds, tenant screening. This is Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. We'll be back with you in just a couple minutes.
For more information on today's program, visit reradiolive.com. That's reradiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit reradiolive.com. That's reradiolive.com. Again, your host for Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Cucchiara.
Welcome back in. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon. Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. We have our guest in studio today, Chapin Hemphill. He is the owner of Keyrenter Silicon Valley. We're talking about the new guidelines by HUD, I should say, on criminal backgrounds during the screening process for renting. And it's quite interesting. It's something that really you should, tune yourself up on if you are about ready to rent, or maybe you're moving from a location, you're going to be renting again. I still say, Chapin, that I think if people that have been lucky, maybe fortunate, whatever, if they've been renting or they've been in the same place for, let's say, 8, 10, 12 years, in some ways they're probably not clueless, but don't understand all these things that have been going on, right? Because it hasn't affected them.
Absolutely.
So those are the people that really should really understand this, because they've been sheltered by it for many years. They've been living in a place, and it's been working well for them, and they're paying the same amount of rent. Nothing's changed, and now it's going to be a bit of a wake up call, maybe, right?
Maybe.
For some people,
could
be. So something to be aware of, for sure. If you have any questions for Chapin on renting, maybe you're getting ready to do that, or you're not quite sure, or, maybe you have some properties that you've been managing yourself. You're not quite sure if you're doing the right thing. That's another thing you might want to ask Chapin about, and make sure you're protecting yourself, because we're going to get into that as well. So, gray areas for rental properties to be aware of.
Well, HUD made two things very clear. One, renting to white ex-cons, but not black or Latino ex-cons, is intentional discrimination,
sure.
Obviously.
Right.
And then two, refusing to rent to people who were arrested but never convicted would violate HUD's new interpretation of this law.
Okay.
So those are the two things that we know. What's not clear is how landlords should treat potential renters with criminal convictions. And that's like everyone else, right? So the guidance does not prohibit landlords from asking about conviction records, but it says that arbitrary and overbroad criminal-related bans will not be a suitable interpretation of the Act. And again, that comes back to, is it going to profoundly affect your property, the neighbors, the other tenants of the property, and if not, you need to come up with a fair policy.
Okay. So I guess the other thing to be very, very careful of is, as a property owner, a landlord, manager, whatever, all this stuff is personal and private information and confidential.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's something else that a person I would have to be very careful about.
Very careful.
If I'm just throwing an example, if you have a property manager, let's say that's in a complex of 50 people, whatever, and they become very, very close with some of the tenants. You just have to be very careful. Now, as I'm listening to you, hearing these things, we don't think about it much unless we live it every day. But those are some of the things people have to be very careful of, right?
Of course, and I that's one reason why I think a property manager is important. You separate that world. It protects the owner. It's another layer of liability protection.
Absolutely. We have a little less than 2 minutes for our next break. What's the rental property owner supposed to do? And we get into that. We could roll into and answer it more on the other side too. But what's the What are some of the things that they should be doing?
If they're going to DIY, they're going to do it themselves.
Okay.
They may be tempted to go on Google and check websites for background check. They got to be very careful with that. That violates certain rights and compliance in the industry. It's a slippery slope, and they should be careful about that. If they do, make sure every step is a legal and accredited one, or you might have issues. Second thing you could do is figure out what best practices are and implement them. Work with a third-party screening company that's compliant. You know you're on the right track if there's a involved setup process and not, can I get your name, your credit card number, and your email?
Okay. Yeah, good point.
And then stay current. This is very hard to do unless you're in the industry. I mean, you either have to be involved with the landlord association, working with a property management company, or just have a natural obsession of the subject. Otherwise, you're not going to know what's going on.
Very good. All right, we're going to take one more break. I shouldn't say one more. We got one more after this. This is Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. Our topic today is the new guidelines on criminal background during tenant screening. If you have any questions, 1-800-516-1220. We'll be back with you in just a couple minutes.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Cucchiara.
Welcome back in. Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. We are with you today having a conversation with our guest, Mr. Chapin Hemphill. He is the owner of Keyrenter Silicon Valley. The topic today is a good one, and one that really people should pay attention to if you're renting or you're going to rent, or maybe you're a landlord. HUD's new guidelines on criminal backgrounds during the tenant screening process. Really important. We've been covering, Chapin has been covering, kind of leading the details, the reason for it, why it exists. And now we're going to talk about, in this segment, we're going to take the time to talk about what happens when a complaint is filed, because it's a 3-step process, right? So I'll have you take us through that.
Correct. So step 1, the plaintiff must prove that a housing provider's criminal history policy is discriminatory based on protected class. If they can do that, you go right to step 2, which puts the burden on the housing provider, the owner, the landlord, the property management company, to prove that its policy is, quote, necessary to achieve a substantial, legitimate, non-discriminatory interest of the provider. Okay? So a policy of rejecting all applicants with convictions is not going to work. It will be unable to meet that burden. A housing provider with a more tailored policy, usually a property management company that has a really organized policy, that excludes individuals with certain types of convictions, must show that its policy accurately distinguishes between the criminal conduct that indicates a presentable risk to the resident's safety and or the criminal conduct that does not. So they have to distinguish what convictions they say are no good and what are okay and why.
Okay.
HUD, in classic HUD fashion, gives no examples as to what types of criminal conduct, such as murder or grand theft, could be excluded from that policy. Yeah. So they're leaving it 100% up to us to figure it out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be problematic, right?
Well, the real problem comes with step 3. The burden shifts back to the plaintiff to prove that the landlord's interest could be served by another practice that has a less discriminatory effect. Okay, so is there a better way? It's troubling for landlords. HUD said that a less discriminatory practice might involve conducting individualized assessments. So, what does that mean? Well, we might have a conversation with the applicant, and asking questions such as, how old were you when you committed the crime? How long ago did the crime happen? And then determine maybe evidence of rehabilitation.
This is during a complaint process if it's being handled by HUD, you mean? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Well, no, this is during the application process.
Okay. Because I want to make sure I was hearing that right.
Yeah.
So they are right. They are at their right to ask those questions.
So HUD is suggesting that in order to treat these applicants fairly, that you do individualized assessments. And again, that would mean asking them specific questions about the crime, when, how have you been rehabilitated.
Are they qualified though?
That's my point. Understand that that for a very long time, housing property management associations, housing landlord associations have all been applying best practices, which essentially are you treat everyone the same.
Yeah, right.
And so this new advice flies in the face of everything that everyone's been advised to do for decades. So what's more, there's no further information or suggestions with how you move forward within this paradox from HUD. I mean, obviously this question's been posed and they don't have an answer. And I personally find it amazing that HUD is expecting housing providers and leasing agents to suddenly become qualified analysts or interpreters of the extremely complex subject of prison rehabilitation. I mean, that's not an issue that's easy to tackle.
The other thing that for me, as I listen to you, this is just mind-boggling because it's so easy for a person to stray off, right, and go in a whole different direction. And where does that take you, and where does that take the applicant? Where does that take the landlord or the property manager? I mean, I don't know. I could be wrong, but this may be more problematic than the problems we had before. But we'll see.
You can see it's a troubling conversation. There's it will be worked out, but as we navigate the muck and mire, it's definitely confusing.
Yeah, and I'll tell you the hard thing, and I think most people, if they're being honest, this would be challenging at best for someone when they're going through for the interviewer. If you're interviewing a process and you automatically detect some kind of criminal record or a conviction or something that would potentially happen or didn't happen, boy, you got to put that hat on that just says put that stuff aside and continue through the way you're supposed to and not judge, right?
Right. I see the problem. A problem is HUD expects us to make decisions that we're just simply not experienced to make.
Yeah, right.
It's odd.
Yeah, and I wonder. There's no easy answers for anything, but again, it's just great to hear you articulate all this because it's really helpful for me. I'm sure it's helpful for the listeners out there. But what keeps coming up is the potential problems that are going to come from this. I know the intent is that be fair, be proactive, don't discriminate. Those are the intentions, right?
Great intentions.
The challenge could be is the way it's set up and the way it's mandated could cause more problems. I
don't think they entirely thought it through. I don't think you can. This is one of those things you should have a panel and really talk it through and make sure that what you're throwing out there makes sense.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take our last break, and we're going to come back and finish up. Again, if you have any questions for Chapin, 1-800-516-1220. This is Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. We'll be back in just a couple minutes.
For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Welcome back to Real Estate Radio Live, streaming live on iHeart, TuneIn, and KDOW.biz. For more information on today's topic or guest, just visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Again, your host for Real Estate Radio Live, Joe Cucchiara.
Welcome back in. Thank you again for joining us this afternoon as we wind down the show. Just a few minutes left. Just to really talk about an informational topic today. HUD's new guidelines on criminal background during the tenant screening. We've been lucky enough to have Chapin join us, who's an expert in this area. He's with Keyrenter Silicon Valley, and just done a great job at giving us the story, because it's a complicated topic, but it needs to be explained, it needs to be brought out, and that's what we're going to do today. So maybe in the next couple of minutes before we finish up, Chapin, if you could just kind of summarize to the listeners again what they should need to know and really the high points here.
Sure. Well, this is a complex issue with a number of moving parts.
Sure.
There's going to be a lot of people working out the kinks, but I would caution landlords and housing providers to do their due diligence. As tenant screening is clearly becoming ever more convoluted. There are, since 2004, there have been over 650,000 ex-convicts released from prison every year. Wow. And they all are looking for housing, and frankly, a lot of them deserve a second chance.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. But it is a confusing subject, and there could be some issues. So this is another reason why you want to seek out a good professional to help you resolve this and even manage it. People here in Silicon Valley, even a 3-bedroom, 1,600 square foot property is worth multiple millions of dollars. And so these assets need to be protected. Yeah. You need to protect your liability. Come up with a good policy. Talk to some people who know what they're talking about.
I would say the other thing too is I'll throw out there is just be open-minded and understand that there's some statistics there that are real about the people exiting prison, and they do need another chance. Everybody, is entitled to another chance. And quite frankly, Chapin, there's a lot of horror stories we hear about renters that maybe don't have criminal records, and people can't get them out of their houses and stuff, right?
Of course.
So, to be fair,
of course, yeah.
I know it's not fair to. I'm not comparing by any means, but what I'm saying is there's all kinds of reasons someone could really do damage to your home or not be in the right place that you want them to be.
Absolutely. Right? I have a lot of stories.
I'll bet you do. All right. Well, before we go, I want to make sure that those want or if they have any information. If someone wants to get a hold of you for a couple of reasons. One, are you okay with them contacting you to hear more about this, or
sure.
Is this a one-time? And Joe, I got to get out of here.
No, absolutely. I'm a resource. You can reach out to me anytime. Okay. My phone number is 408-809-5000. Website KeyrenterSiliconValley.com, and email is info@KeyrenterSiliconValley.com.
Very good. And just to be sure, you were kind enough to share this information with us. It was really, really good. You're an expert at what you do. If someone is looking that they want someone to manage rentals or more information about that, who to contact? I mean, your business is really thriving in the Bay Area. Is that something also people can contact you
Please
about,
give me
right?
a call. I would love to talk to you.
And again, if you give your number out one more time.
408-809-5000.
Very good. All right, we're going to have to check out. Chapin, thank you. It's been a great show.
It's
a lot of great
Here.
information.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in today, and thanks again for tuning in every single day. We'll be back with you tomorrow. This is Joe Cucchiara with Real Estate Radio Live. Take care. Have a great afternoon.
You've been listening to Real Estate Radio Live. For more information on today's program, visit RERadiolive.com. That's RERadiolive.com. Tune in, log in, download our podcast. Discover more at RERadiolive.com. RERadiolive.com.